Excellent. Welcome, everybody. Brad Haskamp with the Minnesota Department of Education. I'm excited to introduce two representatives from HiSET who we will be working quite closely with over the next couple of years. Tanya Haug will be working with us quite closely, and we have already started conversations together about how HiSET will be implemented in the state of Minnesota. And joining Tanya today is Adam Springwater. So I'm going to turn it over to Tanya and Adam. Welcome.
Great, thank you so much, Brad. And Gail, thank you for having us today. What we want to do is give you a brief introduction to the HiSET exam. We're a high school equivalency exam, and we just want to give you a taste of what to expect over the next several months or year as we start testing in Minnesota. As I mentioned today, I've got Adam Springwater with me. You'll get to know both of us pretty well over the next year. So if you're not already familiar with the HiSET exam, we are a high school equivalency exam that has just been adopted by the state. We do have a website that has a lot of great information, actually has an overwhelming amount of information. So we want to walk you through some of it today. And as you can see on the top of this web page, the screenshot, there is going to be a tab for test takers. There's a tab for test centers and educators, and then of course for states and policymakers. You can see you can also translate the website into Spanish there at the top right. And you'll get a copy of this deck, and that way all of these links are live, you'll be able to access them. So if you are a test taker, and I highly encourage if you are an adult educator to scroll through the test taker website, you'll see there's a lot of information that you can get here. In particular, you'll find when they're ready to create a HiSET profile, they can do that at the top right side. They can also change the language from the top right side. And if they're looking for an adult ed center, if they're not already familiar with you, there is a link there where they can actually search for one that will be close to them, as well as a test center. And important for all of you as you're getting to know the HiSET exam, you can sign up for our newsletter and for information, and we'll go ahead and send that to you automatically. That's at the bottom right. Just a couple of things to point out. Now, we don't yet have our Minnesota test centers in our system, but when we do, this is actually the search function. So you'll be able to put in a zip code or your city, and it will populate all the ones on the map below there. We're really excited to bring on Minnesota. And you will find HiSET exam requirements by state will be available on this HiSET state requirements page. And we don't have Minnesota logged in yet because this is actually brand new information that just happened this week. And so there you will find all the information about not only the high school equivalency in Minnesota, but about the HiSET exam itself. Earlier, I mentioned a My HiSET account. This is a test taker account where they can create a profile for themselves, and it will help them access scheduling appointments or viewing any score reports for tests that they have taken. There's an individual subtest report, and then of course a comprehensive report where they can see how they've done across all of their tests. That's really important for them to remember their username that they create, or that will be created, and a password that they create. So just a little bit about the HiSET exam. We do have 5 subtests: reading, writing, math, science, and social studies. You'll see here we're largely multiple choice, except for the writing test. There is one essay question that they must pass to be able to pass the entire writing exam. All in all, it takes about 7 hours to complete the test, or can take up to 7 hours. So we really don't suggest that test takers sit down and take the whole thing all at one time. We really do suggest that they take each subtest as they are ready. Now, in terms of test formats and availability, the HiSET exam is available on computer and paper. Paper will be allowed with some exceptions, or for some exceptions. We do have English and Spanish versions, and of course, accommodated test forms. You must take the HiSET exam at an official HiSET test center or through the HiSET exam at home option. That's a new option we added during the pandemic. And of course, you must meet all the eligibility requirements. The HiSET exam at home is something that we did bring on during the pandemic to help test takers who were not able to access an open test center or might be compromised in some way. And so they just needed to be able to take it at home. The great thing about the HiSET exam at home is that it's currently available 15 hours a day, 7 days a week. So it's really accessible for those who really need that option. And we're going to continue to have that going forward. Now, you might be wondering about HiSET scores. So for each subtest, for a test taker to pass, they must score at least an 8 out of the 20. And I did mention for that writing subtest, they do have to pass the essay section to pass the entire writing subtest. So they must earn at least a 2 out of the 6. And we'll talk, Adam will actually talk a little bit more about that subtest and the writing, the essay portion of the writing test. But as a whole, they do need to achieve a total score of 45 to pass the HiSET battery. Now, if you do have some test takers that a little bit higher achieving on tests, on these high school equivalency tests, if they can score a 15 or above, or a 4 on the essay for the writing test, they actually achieve the college and career readiness scores, which might help them actually test out of some basic level college courses. We do have examples of our score reports available for you and for test takers on our website. This is actually a PDF that helps explain exactly what is on the report itself. You'll see we try to make it really clear whether or not they have passed. And then we provide some other additional information on their performance. Now, their comprehensive score report will always reflect the highest score that they've had on any subtest, in addition to a total score. So you can see here, it will note the subtest on the bottom, when they took that test, whether or not they passed, and the total score. If they're taking the writing test, which this is actually an example of, it will also include that. But it will very clearly say right in the middle whether or not they passed the HiSET exam. So I mentioned these are available on the website. So the links are here. You'll have that with a copy of our deck. And just keep in mind that the official state credential and transcript is always issued by the state, but these reports are available for free to the HiSET test takers in their HiSET account. So I'm going to hand it over now to Adam to talk a little bit more about the test itself.
Thank you, Tanya. Welcome, everybody. Greetings to our friends in the Twin Cities and up in Duluth and at Grand Marais. I spent 5 years in the Midwest, and a lot of good people working in adult education in Minnesota, and we're very excited to be coming into the state to help support you and your programmatic goals. That report, those 2 reports that Tanya just posted, are so exciting to me as an educator because they so clearly state whether or not the student has passed an individual subtest and what they need to do or improve in that area, as well as with the comprehensive. But my other favorite document in the HiSET plethora of documents that we provide is the test at a glance. And this is a great document because it answers the 3 big questions: what's on the HiSET, how it's assessed, and why it's assessed. And it does it for all 5 of the subtests. And it's available in English and in Spanish. Slide. So what I mean by what, how, and why, just take a look at this. So just keep in mind that this is a very reader-friendly document. It's very accessible for both the test taker as well as the administrator and the test instructor, the preparatory instructors. And if you look on the upper left, we'll take a look at what's on the test. First off, it gives you a great overview. And keep in mind, it does this for all 5 of the subtests. So mathematics, The time, 90 minutes, the number of questions, 55, as Tanya mentioned earlier. All of the questions are single response, multiple choice questions. I can tell you as an instructor and someone who worked on test prep, that is a critical component of the HiSET. It allows the student to relax and know that it's going to be a very familiar question with 4 or 5 choices of answers format, no dragging and dropping, no fill in the blanks, none of these other higher order computer skills, which are important, but are not the purpose of an HSC, a high school equivalency exam. And then if you look at the calculator, the math is calculator neutral, which is a fancy way of telling people that you don't actually need the calculator to do any of the computations. You can do them all in your head, but if you're like me, having pencil and paper, scratch paper, which is always available on the math test, or a calculator is good to check your equations. But to the heart of the matter here, now take a look at this content categories. I love geometry. It's one of my favorite topics, and numbers and operations, data analysis. But clearly, if you're going to pass the HiSET or any HSC exam, algebraic concepts are by far nearly half the test. And if you'll remember, a student needs 8 out of 20 on that scale score, roughly 40% to pass. And 45% of the test is algebraic concepts. So if you're a math instructor and you're not sure what your lesson is today, I can tell you it's order of operations and fractions, decimals, percents, and exponents. But this page, this test at a glance, clearly gives the instructor, student, and administrator information on how to best prepare a student to take and pass the test the first time. So that's what's on the test. The content categories tell you how it's assessed. It breaks it down, and then why it's on the test. The test at a glance also breaks down the career and college readiness standards that are specifically indicated why each question is there. A very powerful and easily to digest document. Slide. It also does it for all of the other 5 components, as I mentioned. So if you look at reading, just real briefly, look at this, you can see very clearly, there it is, language arts, 60, the minutes, the number of questions. Oh, there it is, that familiar multiple choice, single response, multiple choice questions, content categories and process categories. Slide. Again, with language arts, it breaks it down. Now, this is one that we've talked about, how this is the one essay question, and it's been in the chat box, but you need a minimum out of 8 out of 20 to pass. One way to think about this is the 60 multiple choice questions can generate up to 14 of those 20 points, and the essay is worth up to 6, but you need a total of 8, and at least 2 of them have to come from the essay. Go figure. It's a writing test, and you actually have to write an essay to pass it. You have to complete, this is the only subtest that has 2 parts. And keep in mind, you have to complete both parts at the same sitting. But again, if you look at this test at a glance document, you can see it really breaks down what's on the test, how it's assessed, and again, there'd be a section on why it's assessed, the career and college readiness standards. Slide. We also provide detailed, students and instructors are always wanting to know what is good and what is good enough. And we provide a tremendous amount of documents. We provide samples, writing samples that really go over the scoring rubric so a student can clearly understand what it takes to pass that minimum 2 out of 6, the limited competence area, and what it takes to get that 4 out of 6, which is the career and college readiness indicator. So these are very easy to digest. Now, we're breaking the cardinal rule. There's more than 7 words on the page. I don't expect you to scan all this very quickly, but keep in mind, you can just simply Google HiSET Writing Response Guide. All of the titles are Google searches as well. And you can get a copy of this guide, or you can reach out to myself or Tanya. We'd be happy to provide you with the links. Slide. And again, here's the 5th and 6th. This is the higher than the score, clearly competent and highly competent. Slide. We also provide, so the written, as you all well know, between mathematics and writing, those 2 have a contest every year to see which one intimidates students the most and which provides the most challenges. And yes, Abby, there are practice tests available. They're not scored by HiSET, but we provide you with a scoring key, and we provide you with all of these rubrics to help you understand how to properly score. But really importantly, with the writing test, we'll give you samples and we'll score them for you and show you again what is good and what is good enough. The written essay is, by the way, always it's a persuasive essay. It's an argumentative essay. Students are given 2 opposing points on an issue and are invited to take a position and support it with examples from the essays and from their personal experience. Slide. And just to break it down, this is an example of what a passing essay would look like for you. And not only does it give you a sample of an actual passing essay written at the top of the page there, but then the guide actually breaks it down. Why did this student pass here? Why was this score indicated that way? That's really a very powerful tool, I can tell you as an instructor, to help students understand, like I said, what is good and what is good enough. Slide. We provide samples and links for this for you. Again, you could Google HiSET writing essay scoring guide and samples and take you to the page. We're happy to provide you with a PDF of all of these slides we're showing you today, and the links will be provided right there for you. So they're available in English and Spanish, the writing response scoring guide, as well as the scored sample writing responses. Slide. Mathematics we covered in the first slide, but again, a closer look at that first page, you can clearly see algebra. That's what we need, linear algebra in particular, but you can see the process categories and how it's broken down. Slide. Let's talk a little bit about calculators, because we always get a lot of questions about that. There is an embedded calculator in the computer-based version of the test. It is the same as any calculator found on any Windows operating system, so you can easily practice. It's a basic 4-function calculator, and the calculator can be moved around the screen as possible. Slide. And here's a sample of where we drag. You can see the CALC, the calc button at the top of the page that can click it on and off. Now, on a paper-based version of the test center itself provides the calculator. It's either 4-function or scientific. It can't have memory. And that's really a state directive. Your state will decide what types of calculators are approved. And the only suggestion that we make at HiSET is that whichever one you're using, you provide the same one for every test taker at each setting, because we want equity, don't we? Slide. There's also a formula sheet that is provided. And again, we get a lot of questions about the formula sheet. The formula provides all of the needed formulas that a student is going to, required formulas that a student is expected to use on an HSE, a HiSET exam. Now, there are 3 formulas that are not included, and we always get questions about this, so we like to take this head on. The distance and the Pythagorean, 2 of my favorite formulas actually, are specifically called out by CCR, Career and College Readiness Standards, as having been memorized by the high school student, and therefore they're not on the test. The quadratic, again, one of my favorites, and I will offer you guys a math workshop to prep for this test, can show you how the quadratic is used all the time in our lives. But the quadratic, again, is not called out as required by CCR standards, so the quadratic itself is tested through different linear algebraic operations like completing the square. But again, my first comment before about math, if you have a firm grasp of order of operations at fractions, decimals, percents, and exponents, you will see how to unpack this quadratic equation and break it down so the student can achieve success. We have the formula sheets available in English and in Spanish. Slide. And here they are in English and in English on the left, Spanish on the right. You can print them up so students can practice with them. Slide. But you'll see that it's also available during the test in the notes and reference help section. Slide. And this is what it would look like as the student accesses it itself. Slide. Science, one of my favorite subjects. Some of you know I now reside in California. Earth science, tectonic plates, earthquakes, that's all very important to me. Physical science, I enjoy chemistry and biology, but if I am trying to prepare my students to pass this HSE exam, I better be focusing on life science. That's basically half the test. So you see how this is a very powerful tool to prepare students to be successful and to give them the confidence that they're properly prepared, and instructors the confidence that they know how to properly prepare. Again, this test at a glance document, very, very powerful tool. Slide. Same thing with social studies. While geography is one of my favorite topics and economics is important to all of us, clearly history, and by this we mean American history mostly, and the civics and government, that government high school class, which some of us have taught, is basically 70% of their test. And yes, Abby, I agree with you very wholeheartedly. Science and social studies subtests are essentially reading comprehension test with a content-specific area. So some information does require to be memorized or known. Like, for instance, it is useful if you know the difference between the Civil War and the Revolutionary War. But even if you didn't, if you had strong reading comprehension skills and had been well prepared, you will probably be able to use logic and inference to answer the test and pass correctly. But again, this test at a glance document will provide you with the roadmap that the student and the instructor needs to know what's on the test, how it's assessed, and why it's there. And again, if you look at this, you'll see this is 70 minutes. It's slightly longer because there is more reading involved. 60 questions. Oh, that's right, Adam. It's that familiar multiple choice questions. I can relax about that. That's that single response that we practiced. And then the content and the process categories. Slides. Tanya, I love presenting on this topic. It's very exciting for me. I think, do you want me to go on with accommodations, or would you like to take this on?
I think I can go ahead and take this one.
Wonderful.
And I will share with everyone that we do have much longer and deeper dive webinars that are available for content specific information. So Adam does a great job of that. Adam is always a teacher, an adult educator at heart. So he speaks your language if you're an adult educator. So we could talk for days and days about that. So there's a lot more information we can share, but we just wanted to give you a taste today. So testing accommodations is really an important part of the HiSET exam because our population typically might need some accommodations. They might have been never diagnosed in a way that would have benefited them. And so as they are now taking the HiSET exam, it might become more important for them. So we're going to talk a little bit about the common accommodations, and you're probably familiar with these. Extended time is a really popular one, a separate room or an audio version, or of course, large print or screen magnification if they're taking it on computer, or even a scribe, additional break time, braille, or a reader or a screen reader. These are the very typical types of accommodations that we see. But it's not limited to these. So if you do have a test taker that has a special accommodation that they're requiring, they really just need to put in the request form, and I'll show you briefly what that looks like. And they need to request their specific accommodation. Once that is approved, it does stay in their HiSET profile. That will stay with them for some time. And I see I had a question asking if anyone can take it on paper. So in Minnesota, what there will be, and Brad can correct me if I'm wrong, you can request a paper as an exception. And so as we move closer to actually launching testing in Minnesota, we will talk more about that. But paper is an accommodation request if someone does need that. So in terms of the process for applying for accommodations, it's really important for test takers and any one of their advocates that's helping them to review the HiSET test taker bulletin and our website. We do have a special department that does review each of the testing accommodation requests to help determine what the needed accommodations are or how we can accommodate the request. So once an accommodation request form is completed and submitted along with its supporting documentation, that group, the Disability Services Group, will actually review the request. They may actually ask for additional documentation. Now, I will say we have actually, because our population is so special, we will also take into account if their teacher does provide a letter on their behalf. You may have someone that really just needs a fairly straightforward accommodation. Maybe it's just extra time. And you have seen through your work with that person, that test taker, that they do better, they perform better, if they have extra time, or if they're in a separate room, or they have additional breaks. Those very simple requests can be validated with support from you as a teacher. But we do encourage all test takers to apply early. And it's very important to apply early because before you can register for a test, that accommodation approval does need to be in place. That is partially because ETS Disability Services will actually coordinate directly with the test center to make sure that they can provide that accommodation to the test taker if they have a preferred test center. If for some reason the test center does not have that accommodation available, we will either work with that test center to make it available. And of course, we provide whatever the accommodation is, or we work with the state if they do have accommodations that are typically available. I know Minnesota is actually very supportive of that. And so it's very important that that approval is in place beforehand. So it can take, as little as 10 days to get an approval for an accommodation, or if it's something that's more complicated or requires more documentation than what was initially provided, it could take up to 6 weeks or more. So we just continue to work with the test taker as they have their application in until we can kind of get it settled. But there is a lot of information actually in the test taker bulletin. So it's really important to know what the instructions are beforehand and the requirements. And just a sneak peek at what the accommodations form looks like. Of course, it's very straightforward, and there are accommodated versions of the form available as well. As I mentioned, the policies and the documentation guidelines are available on our website. So just a couple of things about some test prep and resources that are available, and there are a lot through the HiSET program. I already mentioned the HiSET test taker bulletin. This is really kind of like the golden guide for a test taker and for an adult educator, for you to better understand what your test taker is about to embark on. And then we have a lot of resources. So there's study companions and sample questions and sample tests, practice tests, or free practice tests actually that are available to you. There are guidelines to how many practice tests that we have, because if you're taking a particular practice test and you use the answer key to see how the test takers performed, it's important for you to understand, depending on how well they did on that particular practice test, how well prepared they are to take the real test. So we do provide that. Adam mentioned earlier the formula sheet, but there's a multitude of other documents that are available for test prep. And if you're an educator, we have even more information. We do have a roadmap for instructors that helps you better understand all the resources that are available, in addition to the scoring guide and some other documents we've already mentioned. And of course, we work with test prep providers that are out in the field. Currently, our computer-based official practice test, which is one that is not available to the general public, is available through Essential Education. They will score the official practice test and provide a lot of detail about their performance. And if you're not already familiar with Essential Education, their information is on our website. But we work with a lot of other test prep providers, and sometimes we do webinars in combination with them, but they're always out there, and we do have a lot of their information on our website. Now, in terms of customer service, which is always really important, we do, when you call HiSET, whether you're a test taker or you're a test center, you call and you get a real person, and you will get to know those people. So it's really nice that we have dedicated customer service. They have a great reputation, and they really take to heart how important their job is in helping test takers and adult educators and test centers. And this is available on our website. It's available in the test taker bulletin. If you're a test center, it's available in the HiSET program manual. Lots of information. And as I mentioned, my name is Tanya Haug. I've got Adam with me here today. We're happy to answer any additional questions either today, or if you want to follow up with us via email, I have our emails listed for you here. So Adam, I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to share.
Yeah, we did have a question in the chat for a couple of things. We're very happy to present. This is a short presentation to give you an overview. There was a question in the chat box about the difference between HiSET and GED. Just to be clear, I've worked with both. GD is an excellent tool for what it does, and HiSET is also an excellent tool for what it does. And there are some significant differences, and we invite you to take a look at them. Just real briefly, I'd say the most significant differences that I noticed is that we use the single response, multiple choice question format for the multiple choice questions, which has been shown to lower student anxiety and improve performance. The HiSET enjoys an extremely high pass rate, and I encourage you to take a look at that. And the HiSET also does a couple of other things differently. We use higher order paired passages and higher order questioning to assess reading comprehension. And again, our written essay is the single, basically the persuasive essay, and you're actually required to write an essay. That's a brief overview, but again, I encourage you to take a look at both formats and ask yourself which one you think your students would perform better at.
Thank you, Adam. And I see, Krista, you had a question about accommodations for practice tests. You can actually request an accommodated version of a practice test. So that's something that can be requested through the HiSET website. Or if you have any additional questions, you can always come to one of us and we can help guide that. But it is available. Accommodations for practice tests in particular are available. Let's see if we have any other questions. I will kind of preliminarily answer a couple of questions. We don't yet have a date when we know we're going to be able to start testing. So Brad and his team and I are just starting talking about what that schedule might look like. But what we want to do before we actually have that hard date is to make sure that we have an awareness campaign. So we will be offering different webinars and sessions where you can learn more about the HiSET exam. And that way, when we are ready to start testing in Minnesota, and we've coordinated with all of the test centers and things are ready to go, that you and your test takers are well informed. And I see we have a question about the cost per subject, and give me just a second and let me see if I can pull that up. I think I have it handy, so give me just a second. No, I might not. I can follow up with you. If you can send me your email address, I will follow up with you directly. But we do have a couple of other webinars that are coming up in the next week or so. And so we will be sharing that information about the fees on those sessions. So hopefully you'll be able to join us in those sessions.
Sherry, you asked about instructor practice tests, and if you go to the resources page on the HiSET website, you can see practice tests, free practice tests are available for download that you can take. And there's quite a few of them there in each of the 5 subjects.
Yeah, and I think, Sherry, your question is about the official practice test itself. You know, that's your choice if you want to take the official practice test. There is a fee that is associated with that official practice test.
The online, that is not $2?
Yes.
Yeah.
Per subtest.
Per subtest, yeah.
Yeah.
The online practice test does provide some pretty critical information. And I don't know if the test ready or not, but it provides information on gaps in student readiness and a proposed remedial plan to address those gaps.
Yeah. And Bridget, I see your question about additional languages. That is not something that's on our schedule quite yet, but if there is something that that you would like, we ask that you can share that with us, and we can kind of put that request in with the queue of other requests, but right now that's not in our schedule.
And Abby asked a little bit about the process of becoming a test center. Abby, once the contract is set with the state, and Tanya is working very hard to work that out, there will be an approval process that the state will determine. Once we have state approval, I will walk you through that process. It's very straightforward. Site name, site address, questions you may have about the HiSET program manual, and then there's an e-learning, a training that needs to happen for HiSET staff at your site. It's pretty basic. It's really just, have you read the program manual and do you have any questions about it? And then we help you get set up. We really hold your hand the whole way through. If you want to get in a little bit into the weeds, you can simply Google HiSET program manual, and you will come up with a PDF of it, or I'd be happy to send that to you.
Yeah, actually, Adam, if you could pop the link to the program manual into the chat, I'd appreciate it. Great. I could see your brain turning there.
Full screen.
Yeah, but Abby, we're happy to talk to you more directly about becoming a test center. Honestly, if you are already a test center, the process is pretty straightforward and easy. It's pretty close to what you're already doing. And if you are not currently a test center, that HiSET program manual actually provides you with all the information about becoming a test center, what the requirements are for your facility, security, of course. And I see that you have that specific question about whether or not GED and HiSET tests can be administered by the same staff at the same time to different students. The HiSET program does not have any restrictions against about any other tests that you might be providing. At your test center, you may be providing other tests besides high school equivalency. We don't have any other restrictions about what other tests that you're providing. I am not sure if GED does. I know in some locations they do, but definitely from the HiSET perspective, it can be administered by the same staff. You just have to make sure that the staff is trained to be able to provide the HiSET exam, and the requirements are pretty much the same when it comes to GED and HiSET in terms of test administration. It's just a different platform, but it's pretty easy. You're welcome, Abby. Let's see, we've got another question. After a student takes a practice test, is there an automatic process to align the needed content to study material? There is not currently, but that is something that is in development. So that's something that you can look forward to. These are great questions.
We do have an "Are you ready to take the HiSET" document that will help correlate actual raw scores on all of the practice tests, the free practice tests, with a readiness. And I'm putting links in the chat box, but keep in mind, you can also email us and we'd be happy to provide them for you.
And of course, there's so much more information about the HiSET exam in our program, being in Minnesota, but there's actually lots of other opportunities for us to share that information with you in Minnesota over the next couple of weeks and months.
Yes, Abby, I've done quite a bit of work in the corrections environment, in the gated communities, as we like to call them. And I'd be happy to provide support. I provide a lot of support with Department of Corrections, jails, correctional facilities, youth offender programs, and options programs and the like. And yes, there's a very straightforward process we have a deck, a training that I can, simple 15-minute overview on how to register students. I think if you take a look at the program manual that I put about 3 links ago in there, that will give you a pretty good picture of, especially Chapter 2, personnel and facility requirements, and then we'll move from there. But I'm happy to provide follow-up support. And then, are there wait times and limits on retaking tests? I believe that's a Brad or Tanya question.
Yeah, I can start with that one. So for the HiSET exam itself, there are not any wait times required, but you do have to get your official score before you can register for a retake. Brad, do you have any additional wait times before retaking a particular subtest?
Great question. So in Minnesota, we as a state policy typically do not impose any other wait times or any other restrictions beyond what the publisher says, what the test vendor says is appropriate.
Great, thank you. And it is probably important for me to share, in a calendar year, a test taker can take an individual subtest up to 3 times. So that's the maximum for test takers on any one subtest. They do get 2 free retests when they schedule their initial subtest within a 12-month period. So much information. There's so much. But it will be on the Minnesota HiSET requirements webpage. So when we do get that populated, when we're ready, we'll just ask that you're patient with us as we work some details out with the state, but that will all be provided there. And of course, if you have any additional questions, you can always reach out to our customer service group. We do have a chat function that's available on our website. You can call in or you can peruse our frequently asked questions, which will be there too.
And I would just like, I'm going to put the state requirements link in here for everybody. And even though Minnesota isn't listed there, you could take a look at some of the neighboring states. And what you're going to see is that HiSET Guide was one of the resources we provided as a sort of a PDF version of this, but it answers a tremendous number of questions. What's on the test, how to prepare. And a lot of these resources that y'all have been asking about in the chat are also linked directly through that state requirements page. So it's really a great first stop for people. And you can take a look and see what kinds of information would be available. Keep in mind, it'll be specific to Minnesota. And when we do those searches, it will populate. Well, actually, you can try the search features. It's pretty powerful. Anyway, I use it. I have access to the HiSET mainframe, and I still use that search feature on our webpage. Is so powerful. It will link to all test centers in the area constrained by 5, 25, 50, 100-mile radius. You can search by zip code, name of state, anything, Disneyland. You can really do some interesting searches. And then it not only all the test centers, depending on the type of search you're using, but it'll provide you with a link directly to them. Very powerful site.
Yeah. So Gail, I think we've answered all the questions that have come up so far.
So yeah, Tanya, I was hoping maybe we could ask the audience some questions now. Flip the tables a little bit. So thank you both, Tanya and Adam, for sharing kind of a taste, an initial idea of what the HiSET looks like and how that will look like maybe even in Minnesota, or starting to get that vision. So in the chat, I'd really love to hear from the audience. Which of you are thinking that you might be interested in setting up a HiSET testing center in the near future? And this isn't by no means a commitment. We are just kind of curious who is interested, and are you interested very immediately or eventually? Who's interested, and when are you interested in maybe exploring this? Let's start with that question in the audience. Thank you for sharing your locations. And also, Laura, I hear you ASAP. Okay, that's good to know.
We like that.
We'll get there.
Yep. That's also good to know, Kirsten, thinking about those that are just wanting to know more before they decide. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I would strongly suggest you go to that HiSET program manual and spend literally 5 minutes looking at chapter 2. It's literally 5 pages long. Most of them are bulleted. Facility and personnel requirements. It's usually the first go-to stop. Or that state requirements link that I sent you, so you can get an answer, so an idea.
Oh yeah, Angie, I hear you in Duluth. You just shut down the GED testing center. Just shut down there.
Is that in Duluth?
Oh, wow.
In Duluth, correct.
Very good friend from Duluth. Y'all know it. So just so you know, HiSET does not require its own server. What it does is require a proxy server, what I call the teacher's. Again, this is in the program manual, but the teacher's computer becomes what I call the teacher computer. The one the students don't test, that becomes a proxy server only for the period of the test. As Tanya mentioned earlier, we don't care what you do with these computers before or after the test. You can do other testing, whatever. So it's a pretty straightforward process. A lot of these questions, 15 or 20 minutes in the program manual, will answer them. And of course, as Tanya said, you can reach out to either of us.
Excellent.
And Sue, I'm curious about your working closely with Iowa. We have so many new friends to get to know.
Yeah, Sue's located in Blue Earth, and so that's right near the Iowa border there in southwestern Minnesota.
See that?
Southwestern, a little bit more south central. Yeah. Excellent. Okay, so it looks like we have quite a bit, and Christine's kind of launched into my next question that I wanted to know from the audience. So we got it's so exciting to have Tanya and Adam provide kind of an initial overview of HiSET. Now like Tanya and Adam said, we need to do additional work. Like there's work that you can do in exploring the many resources that Adam and Tanya have shared online and on the HiSET website. But I'd also like to know, as we schedule future events, what types of specific training or what types of specific questions would you like to see addressed or outlined in future trainings, future webinars, administrator sessions, special sessions? So a little bit of what topics and who should we gather and who should we promote future sessions with or specific sessions with? So in the chat, and I'm going to download the chat afterwards so we have this so Tanya and I can continue to explore this. So please, any specific topics for training, any specific ideas, like we would love to have a session that includes these people and talks about this, or maybe you want more one-on-one or site-based conversations, or maybe you want to like offer yourself up as an initial pilot for HiSET. Tell me what kind of training or conversations would you like to see going forward? Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Karen. Excellent question. Like, how will this work with GED? And if we have a GED test center already, what does that mean for setting up or exploring being a HiSET test center? And Tanya, I think you have an initial answer on that, but we can explore this further, right?
Yes. So in terms of, if you are already a test center, in particular for GED, you might also provide other tests. It's going to be pretty familiar for you to become a HiSET test center. A lot of the security requirements and equipment requirements are very similar. And so, what will happen is, as Adam mentioned, he can have an initial discussion with you, kind of just walk you through some key points in the program manual. We would send you a test center MOU just to make sure that you're signing off on the security requirements. You would also provide us with your chief examiner name, other staff contact, can't talk today, contacts for test administration. And that way we can actually provide you access to our HiSET platforms and the training, the required training. But everything that you're already doing as an existing testing center is probably going to be pretty close. So it will be very familiar to you. And in terms of how long it takes to become a test center, because that's usually kind of the next question. Once you are familiar with the program manual and we get the test center initiated, MOU initiated, then it's really dependent on how quickly you can get us the information that we need back, the signature for the MOU and your staff contact information, as well as completing the required training. If you can do that all within a couple of days, the setup process is pretty quick. It can be very, very quick turnaround time. If it takes you a little bit longer because perhaps you need to identify or acquire the staff that's needed, say you're not currently a test center, but you want to become a test center, it's really important for you to have the appropriate staff for testing. For example, if you are an adult ed program and you want to add a test center, you cannot have teachers that teach HiSET content or students. They cannot serve as test center staff. So it's really important that there's a distinction between those, and that's a security policy that we have in place. So if it takes you a little bit longer to determine, the right staff, then it will take the process a little longer. But if you are ready to go and you're currently a test center and you kind of scan everything and say, yep, this is what we're already doing, then it can take, very, very little time.
A lot of questions in the chat box about the difference between HiSET and GED. I'll tell you, I've been in adult education for a long time. I have offered both. I wear the HiSET badge, so I'm not going to pretend to be a wolf in sheep's clothing. I am biased, and I chose to work for HiSET for a reason. I'm happy to have a conversation with any or all of you about the differences, but it's always going to be your decision. A lot of times you get asked, well, which one is better? And the truth is, you know your students better than I do, and as well it should be. And certain there are certain things that affect a student's performance, and most of them are perceptual. As you know, it's the perception of a student's ability that is the strongest effect on their outcome. And some students have a perception that one or the other is going to be better for them, and that is the reality in which they live. There are some technical things, so I don't try to address that. Some people just want GED because it's like Xerox versus IBM versus Macintosh. Well, not so much anymore, but when Mac first hit the streets, a lot of people went with IBM because it was big blue. It had been around forever. Whether you buy a Ford or whether you buy that new Korean maker, these are perceptual issues. There are some technical things on the ground that Tanya and I can point out to you and let you decide whether or not that is going to be a decision making for you. There's certainly certain instructors have biases and things like that, but there are some practical differences, and I've mentioned a few of them already, and we can go into more detail. These are different tools in the toolbox, and when I was in adult ed, having this, I call it spaghetti on the wall. You just don't know what's going to stick with a student, and why wouldn't you want as many tools as possible? I will say one of the deciders for me with the HiSET is, and I know, Tanya, I don't need to go, you know I'm passionate about this. Real briefly, the Prius, a car is one of my least favorite cars, but because of the way people drive them here in California, but it is the most popular and best-selling car of its kind ever because Toyota designed it from the ground up to be a Prius. That's why it's so successful. Same thing with other products. HiSET was designed from the ground up starting in 2012 with research done in Iowa. So Midwestern researchers started us off and then followed up with detailed conversations with adult education centers, Korean college program directors across the country. And it has been specifically engineered to provide the high school candidate with the best opportunity to demonstrate their content proficiency. So it's a very well engineered product, and it enjoys an exceptionally high, over 75% pass rate. It's very hard to not look at that carefully. I don't want to sound like I'm trying to sell you guys anything. I'm passionate about what I do, but I'm happy to have a conversation about what you think is best for your students.
Yep, and I see we had a couple of other questions about brand recognition. That definitely is something we're fighting. A 70 plus year institution. But little known fact, ETS, which is where HiSET originated, was actually part of that process. We actually worked with ACE when the GED was created. So behind the scenes, you just didn't know it was powered by the ancestors of the HiSET exam. But yeah, we do understand though. It's really important, I think, for you to understand or to know, and I think somebody did mention this, there are 9 states that only use the HiSET exam. Most of them have only used the HiSET exam or used it exclusively since 2014. So your concerns about awareness when it comes to employers or maybe even colleges understanding that the HiSET exam is different from the GED, the best way to explain it is the official credential comes from the state. It doesn't matter which test you took. The state has approved the use of the actual assessment itself to earn that credential. We have actually spent a lot of time talking to employers, validating that the HiSET transcript or the HiSET exam itself is actually approved by the state, and explaining what that credential actually means. It's just something that's a learning curve for some people, but usually once we get somebody on the phone, and we're happy to make those phone calls in addition to initial outreach. So what part of our process will be is looking at key employers in the state and making sure that we proactively reach out to them because we want them to encourage their employees, if they don't have a high school equivalency already, to move in that direction. So there will be an outreach campaign that helps employers and other people, other stakeholders in your test taker's journey to understand a little bit more about the HiSET exam and high school equivalency as a whole. It's a big part of our job, honestly.
And real briefly, Abby, you asked a question about a brief list of content and skills. Please take a look at the test at a glance. If you saw from those slides, It's 4 or 5 pages. It's a bulleted list. It succinctly ties it in to content as well as CCR standards. I think you'd be very pleased. I was as an instructor. And tell you the truth, what it let me do is it let me continue to use my existing materials and just use the index at the back of my materials to cross-reference it to the CCR standards that were covered in each test. So I knew that I was preparing my students for the specific content area they needed to pass. Very powerful tool.
Excellent. Well, Tanya, Adam, thank you so much. I know that these questions we could continue for another hour, dive deeper. And this is like our first step in this direction with the rest of the field. And so I'm so glad for all of your ideas. I've saved the chat, and I'm really thankful for having this time to get this conversation started. One other step, Tanya is also joining our HiSET advisory group, so along with Melissa Holtzstrom from GED and our 9 wonderful HiSET members. And we actually are meeting for the first time on November 16th, where we're going to explore a lot of these issues there as well. So, and we also will continue our HiSET conversation at the fall manager meeting for a brief period. So I'm really excited for what we have going ahead. And thank you both so much for all the rich information and for giving our programs a lot to digest over the next couple months. And we're excited to hear more and communicate more. Anything else you want to say, Tanya or Adam, as we close out?
I'll just say thank you for all the hard work that you've been doing over the last year and a half. It has been extraordinary times, and the challenge that you have faced in adult education, working closely with your students that we know that you care so much about because you're in adult education. It is just amazing to us, and we are so glad to be partners in this journey with you.